On one night in 1997, thousands of Americans looked up and saw something the government still can't explain. So, let's explore what really happened that night. Subscribe to Next Level Pro for more real mystery stories. March 13th, 1997, Arizona, United States. It started like any ordinary night in the American Southwest. Quiet deserts, long highways, and endless skies filled with stars. But something was coming, something thousands of people would see and never agree on. That night, the sky over Phoenix would become the stage for one of the most controversial and widely witnessed UFO events in modern history. It would later be called the Phoenix Lights Incident, and to this day it remains unanswered. The first signs. It began just after sunset. Around 7:30 p.m., residents in Henderson, Nevada, started noticing something strange in the sky. A formation of lights, not airplanes, not stars, not satellites. A massive triangular shape moving silently across the sky. People described it as enormous, so large it seemed to block out the stars behind it. At first, witnesses thought it might be military aircraft. Nevada is home to several Air Force test ranges, including Area 51. But there was something wrong. No sound. No blinking navigation lights. Just a dark object with glowing lights arranged in a perfect formation. And it was moving too slowly, too smoothly, to be any known aircraft. Within minutes, more reports began pouring in. From Kingman, from Prescott, from Phoenix itself. Something was traveling across Arizona skies. Witnesses watched in disbelief as the formation continued southward. Some estimated it was flying only a few thousand feet above the ground. Others insisted it was much higher. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever it was huge. Families gathered in their front yards. Motorists pulled over to the side of highways. Police dispatch centers began receiving calls from concerned citizens asking the same question. What is that thing? The object appeared to glide effortlessly through the night. No engine noise, no sonic boom, no visible means of propulsion, just silence, an eerie, unsettling silence. As the lights passed overhead, many witnesses claimed they could make out a solid structure connecting them, not separate lights, not individual aircraft. A single enormous craft. Some described it as a giant boomerang. Others called it a flying triangle. A few compared it to an aircraft carrier floating through the sky. Then came the reports from Phoenix. Hundreds of people, then thousands. The event was no longer a local sighting. It had become a statewide phenomenon. News stations began receiving phone calls. Radio hosts interrupted programming. Emergency operators struggled to keep up with the flood of reports. Even trained observers were watching. Pilots, police officers, military veterans. Many of them later stated they had never seen anything like it. Yet strangely, radar systems showed little or nothing unusual. The sky appeared normal on instruments. But on the ground, thousands of eyes were fixed upward, watching, waiting, trying to understand what they were seeing. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the mysterious formation continued southward and vanished into the darkness. For many witnesses, the experience would become one of the most unforgettable moments of their lives. But the night was far from over. Hours later, another series of lights would appear above Phoenix. Brighter, more dramatic, and far more controversial. The event would soon become known around the world as the Phoenix Lights, one of the most famous and disputed UFO incidents in history. And nearly 3 decades later, the question remains, what really crossed the skies of Arizona that night? Thousands become witnesses. By 8 p.m., the phenomenon had grown. This was no longer a local sighting. It was a statewide event. Police departments began receiving emergency calls. Air traffic controllers checked radar. Nothing unusual appeared, but people on the ground saw it clearly. A massive V-shaped craft, described by many as the size of a football field, or even larger. Some said it was completely solid. Others said it seemed to distort the air around it. Families stepped outside in confusion. Drivers pulled over on highways, pointing upward in shock. Children cried. Adults stood frozen. One witness said, "It wasn't like watching something fly. It was like watching something exist in the sky." Another said, "It blocked out the stars. I've never seen anything so big in my life." And then came the silence. No jets intercepted it. No military warnings were issued. No explanation was given. It simply moved across the sky and disappeared. But the mystery was only beginning. As reports spread across Arizona, local radio stations were overwhelmed with callers describing the same impossible sight. The descriptions varied, the details changed, yet a pattern emerged. A gigantic craft, a triangular formation, absolute silence. Witnesses who had never met each other told remarkably similar stories. Some claimed they could see a dark structure connecting the lights. Others said the object appeared almost transparent, as if it was somehow blending into the night sky. A retired military pilot watched in disbelief. He later stated that whatever he saw did not behave like any aircraft he had encountered during his career. Another witness reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease as the object passed overhead. Not fear, not panic, just the strange feeling that something profoundly unusual was happening. Then, around 10 p.m., a second event unfolded. Far to the south of Phoenix, a new series of lights appeared. Unlike the earlier sightings, these lights did not move across the sky. They hovered, bright, stationary, suspended above the mountains beyond the city. Thousands watched as the lights slowly appeared one by one, then vanished, then reappeared. Some observers counted 5 lights, others counted 7. Television cameras captured the phenomenon. For the first time, the mystery was no longer based solely on eyewitness testimony. There was video evidence. The lights remained visible for several minutes. Then, one after another, they faded into darkness. Gone, as if they had never been there at all. The following morning, Arizona woke up with questions. What had thousands of people witnessed? Why had so many independent reports described the same object? And why was there no immediate explanation? The military eventually offered an answer. Officials stated that the later lights seen over Phoenix were military flares dropped during a training exercise. To many, the explanation seemed reasonable, but not everyone was convinced. Because the flare explanation only addressed the second event, it did not explain the enormous V-shaped object reported hours earlier by witnesses across hundreds of miles. The debate intensified. Skeptics pointed to misidentified aircraft, optical illusions, and human error. Believers argued that too many people had seen too much for it to be a simple mistake. Years passed. Investigations continued. Documentaries were produced. Experts analyzed videos frame by frame. Witnesses stood by their stories. And despite countless theories, one fact remained unchanged. On the night of March 13, 1997, thousands of ordinary people looked into the Arizona sky and saw something they could not explain. Something that transformed a quiet desert evening into one of the most famous UFO cases in modern history. A mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The Phoenix Lights, not because of what was proven, but because of what could never be fully explained. The second event, the flares. Most people thought the incident was over, but at 10 p.m. something even stranger happened. Over Phoenix, a second formation of lights appeared. This time, they were stationary, perfectly aligned in a wide arc over the city. And unlike the earlier event, these lights were bright and glowing steadily. Dozens of residents reported them. But this is where the story becomes controversial, because the US Air Force later claimed the lights were nothing more than flares dropped during a military training exercise at the Barry Goldwater Range. According to officials, the earlier triangle, not mentioned. The massive silent craft, not acknowledged. The thousands of witnesses before 10 p.m. ignored. Only the second set of lights was explained away. But many witnesses strongly disagreed. They insisted the flares were a completely separate event. Because flares fall, these lights didn't. They hovered, they moved together, and they appeared too organized to be random burning objects. One witness said, "I've seen military flares before. This was nothing like that. These lights were controlled." The disagreement quickly grew into a national debate. On one side were military officials, aviation experts, and skeptics who argued that unusual lights in the sky often appear mysterious when viewed from long distances at night. On the other side were thousands of eyewitnesses who remained convinced they had witnessed something extraordinary. The controversy only deepened when video footage began circulating across television networks and later the internet. Researchers examined the recordings frame by frame. Some believed the videos showed lights disappearing behind a mountain range, behavior consistent with descending flares. Others argued the lights vanished independently, suggesting they were separate objects rather than a single group of flares. No analysis satisfied everyone. Years later, the event continued to divide opinion. Then came another surprising development. In 2007, 10 years after the incident, former Arizona Governor Fife Symington made headlines when he publicly discussed what he had seen that night. At the time of the event, Symington had joked about the sightings during a press conference. even bringing out a staff member dressed as an alien to lighten the mood. But years later, his tone changed. He stated that he had personally witnessed a massive unidentified object. According to Symington, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. His comments reignited public interest in the case. If a governor claimed to have seen something extraordinary, many wondered, should the incident be taken more seriously? Investigators returned to old reports. Witnesses were interviewed again. Documentaries revisited the evidence. Yet despite decades of analysis, no explanation managed to answer every question. What were the lights seen over Phoenix at 10 p.m.? Were they truly military flares? If so, why did so many witnesses insist otherwise? And perhaps more importantly, what about the enormous silent object reported hours earlier? The object seen by thousands across hundreds of miles. The one that appeared to glide silently through the Arizona sky. The one that, according to many witnesses, blocked out the stars. To this day, no official explanation has fully accounted for every report connected to the Phoenix lights. Skeptics argued that the event was a combination of military activity, misidentified aircraft, and human perception. Believers argued that too many credible witnesses saw the same thing for it to be dismissed so easily. And somewhere between those two positions lies a mystery that has endured for decades. A mystery born on a clear desert night. A mystery witnessed by thousands. A mystery that transformed the Phoenix lights from a simple sighting into one of the most discussed UFO cases in modern history. Because whether the answer was military, natural, or something far more unusual, the people who looked up that night never forgot what they saw. And many still insist that the official explanation does not tell the whole story. Government response. The official explanation came quickly. Too quickly, some say. The Air Force stated that the 10 p.m. lights were illumination flares dropped during training exercises. Case closed, at least officially. But the public reaction was not so simple. Journalists began investigating. UFO researchers analyzed footage, and thousands of witnesses shared their stories. But something strange happened. Many eyewitness reports from police officers, pilots, and trained observers were quietly dismissed or ignored. Even more unusual, questions remained about what radar systems had detected that night. Why? If nothing unusual happened, why did so many people continue searching for answers? For skeptics, the answer was straightforward. Mass sightings can create confusion. Memories can change, and people sometimes misinterpret ordinary events under extraordinary circumstances. But for many witnesses, that explanation wasn't enough. They weren't claiming to have seen distant lights. They were describing a massive object, something structured, something physical, something that appeared to move with purpose. As the years passed, investigators uncovered hundreds of additional witness statements. Some had never spoken publicly before. Others were afraid of being ridiculed. Many described the same details. The silence, the size, the strange feeling that accompanied the sighting. One former witness recalled, "It wasn't the lights that disturbed me. It was what seemed to be between them." Another said, "It felt impossible. My brain kept telling me I couldn't be seeing what I was seeing." The mystery only grew. Television specials revisited the case. Experts debated the evidence. Pilots offered their opinions. Astronomers offered theirs. No single explanation satisfied everyone. Then came the bigger question. If the flares explained the lights seen later that night, what explained the reports from earlier? The sightings that stretched across hundreds of miles. The object reported long before the flare event occurred. For some, the answer was simple. A secret military aircraft. After all, Arizona and Nevada have long been associated with classified aviation projects. Advanced aircraft have been tested there for decades. Could witnesses have unknowingly observed an experimental vehicle? Others disagreed. They argued that even advanced aircraft produce noise. They appear on radar. They obey the known limits of aviation. The object described by many witnesses seemed different, too quiet, too large, too unusual. And so the theories multiplied. Experimental military technology, atmospheric phenomena, mass misidentification, an elaborate misunderstanding, or something else entirely. Nearly 3 decades later, the debate continues. The videos remain online. The witness testimonies remain on record, and the questions remain unanswered. What crossed the skies of Arizona on March 13, 1997? Why did thousands of people report seeing the same thing? Why do so many witnesses still stand by their accounts after all these years? Perhaps the most remarkable part of the Phoenix lights isn't what was seen. It's that so many people saw it. People from different cities, different professions, different backgrounds, all looking at the same sky, all trying to understand the same mystery. And despite decades of investigation, one fact remains unchanged. The Phoenix Lights continue to occupy a unique place in modern history, not because everyone agrees on what happened, but because no explanation has ever convinced everyone who was there. For some, the case is solved. For others, it remains one of the greatest unexplained aerial mysteries ever recorded. And somewhere between those two views lies a question that still echoes across the Arizona desert. What really happened that night? The witnesses speak. These weren't isolated reports. They came from police officers, military veterans, commercial pilots, astronomers, their families across multiple cities. One police officer described seeing the object move silently over his patrol car. A pilot reported an enormous structure crossing flight paths without appearing where he expected it to. A mother in Phoenix said her children were terrified, crying as the sky looked wrong. Another witness said something chilling. It felt like the sky was being watched back. Years later, interviews still revealed remarkably consistent descriptions. Silent movement, a massive size, structured formation, unusual flight characteristics, no obvious signs of conventional propulsion. Even skeptics admitted something unusual occurred. The only disagreement was what it was, and that may be the most fascinating part of the entire story. Witnesses came from different backgrounds, different cities, different professions. Many had never met. Many didn't even know others had reported the same thing until later. Yet when investigators compared their accounts, the similarities were difficult to ignore. Again and again, people described a dark object. Again and again, they spoke about silence. Again and again, they estimated a size far larger than any ordinary aircraft. Some witnesses became emotional during interviews years later, not because they believed they had seen extraterrestrials, but because they knew what they had witnessed had profoundly affected them. One veteran said, "I spent years around military aircraft. Whatever I saw that night wasn't normal." Another witness explained, "I don't know what it was. I only know what it wasn't." As more interviews emerged, investigators noticed another recurring detail. Many witnesses struggled to describe the experience itself, not the object, the feeling. Some spoke of awe. Others described confusion. A few reported an overwhelming sense of insignificance, as if they were looking at something far beyond their understanding. One witness compared it to standing beside a mountain that had suddenly come to life. Another said it felt less like watching a machine and more like witnessing a presence. Whether those impressions reflected reality or simply the emotional impact of the event remains impossible to know. But they became part of the story, a story that refused to disappear. Every few years, the Phoenix Lights returned to public attention. New documentaries, new interviews, new analyses, each attempting to answer the same question. What exactly did thousands of people see on March 13, 1997? Supporters of the military explanation argued that the event was a combination of aircraft formations, flares, distance, darkness, and human perception. Supporters of the unidentified object theory argued that the witness testimony pointed to something much more extraordinary. Neither side succeeded in convincing the other, and perhaps that is why the Phoenix Lights remain so famous, not because they proved the existence of alien visitors, not because they conclusively revealed secret military technology, but because they occupy a rare place in modern history, a case where thousands of people witnessed something extraordinary, a case with photographs, videos, official statements, and decades of investigation, yet still no answer accepted by everyone. Nearly 30 years later, the witnesses continue to tell their stories. Researchers continue to debate the evidence, and the Arizona sky continues to hold its secret. A silent formation, a night of confusion, a mystery seen by thousands. The Phoenix Lights, one of the most compelling and enduring unexplained aerial events ever recorded. The Triangle Debate. The most debated part of the Phoenix Lights is the massive triangular craft seen earlier in the evening. Some believe it was a secret military aircraft, an experimental stealth project, a classified drone system. Others believe it was something not human. What makes this case so compelling is scale. No known aircraft in 1997 could easily match the size described by many witnesses. And if it was secret technology, why was it seen by so many civilians across multiple states? Even more puzzling, why was there no obvious public response? No emergency alerts, no public warnings, just silence. For supporters of the military theory, there are possible explanations. Arizona and Nevada have long been home to some of the most secretive aviation programs in American history. Experimental aircraft have been tested there for decades. Many projects remained classified for years before becoming public knowledge. Could the witnesses have unknowingly observed technology that was years, or even decades, ahead of what the public knew existed? It's possible, but critics of that theory point to another problem. The witnesses weren't describing a fast-moving aircraft. They weren't describing a distant jet. They were describing something enormous, something that appeared to move slowly, deliberately, almost effortlessly, and according to many accounts, in complete silence. That silence became one of the greatest mysteries. Aircraft produce noise. Large aircraft produce a lot of noise. Yet witness after witness described the same thing. Nothing. No engines. No roar. No vibration. Just a giant dark shape gliding overhead. Then there was the issue of visibility. Secret military programs are typically tested under controlled conditions, away from large populations, away from public attention. Yet whatever crossed Arizona that night was reportedly observed by thousands. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. If it was a classified aircraft, some ask, why expose it to so many witnesses? Others counter that perhaps the object wasn't as large as people believed. Perhaps darkness, distance, and perspective made multiple aircraft appear to be one giant craft. Perhaps witnesses interpreted separate lights as a connected structure. It is a theory that many investigators have considered, but once again, there was no consensus. Every explanation seemed to answer some questions while creating new ones. Then came the most controversial possibility of all. What if the object was truly unidentified, not necessarily extraterrestrial, not necessarily alien, simply unidentified? Something that could not be conclusively linked to any known aircraft, technology, or natural phenomenon. For some researchers, that remains the most honest answer, not because it proves anything extraordinary, but because certainty remains impossible. The evidence points in different directions. The witness testimony is compelling. The videos are inconclusive. The official explanation addresses part of the event, but not all of it. And so the mystery endures. Decade after decade, generation after generation, the Phoenix Lights have become more than a UFO story. They have become a case study in uncertainty. A reminder that even in the modern age of satellites, radar systems, and constant surveillance, some events still resist easy explanation. Perhaps there is a simple answer waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the witnesses collectively misinterpreted what they saw. Or perhaps the truth remains hidden somewhere within the thousands of reports, photographs, recordings, and memories left behind. Whatever the answer may be, one fact is undeniable. On the night of March 13, 1997, something happened over Arizona. Something that captured the attention of an entire state. Something that sparked debates that continue nearly 30 years later. And until every question is answered, the Phoenix Lights will remain one of the most fascinating aerial mysteries in modern history. A silent shape, a desert sky, thousands of witnesses, and a mystery that refuses to disappear. The government's final position. Years later, officials maintained the flare explanation, but public belief remained divided. Some accepted it as a misunderstanding. Others saw it as one of the most significant UFO mass sightings in modern history. The case never received a formal investigation like other major incidents. No conclusive report, no verified explanation, just competing narratives and unanswered questions. The legacy of Phoenix Lights. Today, the Phoenix Lights incident remains one of the most documented UFO events in history. Unlike many sightings, this one had thousands of witnesses, multiple cities involved, police and pilot testimonies, AU video recordings, government response, and yet, no final answer. For believers, it represents proof that we are not alone. For skeptics, it remains a misunderstood combination of flares and misidentification. But for those who saw it firsthand, the memory remains unchanged. Something massive moved silently across the Arizona sky that night, and no explanation has ever fully satisfied everyone. Final line, documentary ending style. If it was a military secret, it was too large to hide. If it was a natural misunderstanding, it was too organized to ignore. And if it was something else, then on March 13th, 1997, America didn't just see lights in the sky. It saw something it still cannot explain.